Now, any self-respecting person builds a bridge, has it get halfway across the river, and then keep going straight. But this bridge doesn't go straight.
It turns 22 degrees for some reason. Construction crews built this during the middle of Prohibition. So you can't even blame the booze. And it wasn't cheap either. 24 feet wide, nearly a mile long, and solid steel.
At a typical civil engineering story, they estimated it would cost about $1 million to build a big grand structure like this at the time. By the time they were done, it cost $2 million.
This is the Chain of Rocks Bridge. For 40 years, it brought drivers on Route 66 across the Mississippi River into Missouri and the city of St. Louis.
They call this a cantilever through truss bridge. Cantilever because it hangs out over something. Through truss because instead of the trusses being underneath where you drive, you're actually driving inside the truss.
This is just one of dozens of goofy bridges.
Bridge railing looks historic, but it's way too nice.
That took Americans back and forth across the country for decades.
And this thing, well, it might not get preserved.
As Route 66 celebrates 100 years,
I have a theory why they closed this bridge. Not looking so good.
Why the highway can never reopen.
66 is closed forever.
But first, what's up with this? I hate to throw away a perfectly good bridge, even if it is bent in the middle. Engineers only do something stupid looking like this when nature tells them they have to.
A big reason are the piers that hold the bridge up. They got to connect to bedrock deep in the ground. And
every civil engineering project is only as good as the ground it stands on. Deep below the Mississippi River on the Illinois side, there's sturdy bedrock that can carry a bridge, but it got kind of squishy on the Missouri side.
Had the bridge kept going straight, that bedrock wasn't very good.
And
where they wanted to land on the Missouri side, the water department got there first and built a water treatment plant.
So up until 1971, drivers would have to crawl around this corner on the old Route 66 until the state of Missouri replaced it with a full freeway.
By the late 1960s, Illinois and Missouri finished building I-270 along with the new Chain of Rocks Bridge here, which means this old Chain of Rocks Bridge, they didn't need it anymore.
With a much faster and straighter way to cross the Mississippi River, the old bridge sat there for 25 years, rotting away. In 1998, a trails group leased it, and today, with a little money from the Park Service, well, you don't need a car to cross the Mississippi River with style.
They're building out this entire regional greenway. If America ever builds a Chicago to Santa Monica Route 66 bike trail, you'll cross the mighty Mississippi River right here.
Landing at a new 16-acre park that'll be sort of a hub for all these trails. A joint venture between the city of St. Louis and the adjacent counties.
Most parking lots, the water hits and then just washes away somewhere into a storm drain. Here it can actually soak into the ground.
Engineers call this permeable pavement, pass-throughable. But the Chain of Rocks Bridge wasn't the first Route 66 bridge into the city. It was actually the third.
A little over 6,000 feet long, about 90 feet above the water.
This bridge, which is older, already seems better because it goes straight across the river.
The city of Venice, Illinois opened this to traffic in 1910, long before anybody even conceived of the idea of a US 66.
And they gave it a really presidential name, the McKinley Bridge.
William B. McKinley, president of an electric railroad company, not the U.S.
But the bridge lands in the heart of St. Louis's industrial district.
The little two-lane bridge would drop cars on the north side of downtown St. Louis.
It only took a few years for traffic to get so bad, they built the Chain of Rocks Bridge to replace it.
By 2001, this was in such bad shape they shut it down. But with a $50 million project, it reopened to cars in 2007.
Humanity versus the elements. That's the story of Route 66 in the state of Missouri. As Mother Nature and Father Time team up to erase what we've built.
I mean, across the street is a beautiful, historic-looking school, and then that looks like it's bombed out.
Life on the north side of St. Louis is rough.
Not what you expect on a Route 66 trip.
As Americans this summer drive the old highway to celebrate its 100th birthday, they'll find it's no Disneyland.
There's an authenticity to this, though, because these are real people and this is just the way their neighborhood is.
St. Louis Magazine says investors are buying up buildings here, but they don't seem very enthusiastic about fixing the place up. The government, well, the Bi-State Development Agency, wanted to help and expand the Metrolink light rail service up into this neighborhood. Add 10 new light rail stops and call it the Green Line. But it was pricey, so
the new line would be using buses.
The new Green Line buses would drive in a new designated lane.
At least they got a different green lane through downtown. This protected mile-long bike lane on Tucker Boulevard, which ties the bike network together, but drivers had to go down from 8 lanes to 6. It's not the only downtown downsizing.
Television station parking lot with nobody in it. That's kind of an omen for the future of broadcasting.
Over the 50 years Route 66 existed in the city, it took 5 different paths through town.
South of downtown St. Louis, we have a choice. Keep following the 1920s route like we did all through Illinois, or try the 1940s route instead. Let's do that.
On to Gravois Street. Exactly the way the French intended Missourians to say it, I'm sure. During the 1940s, Route 66 moved onto these larger suburban streets, and the city's southwest suburbs grew up around the car.
Neighborhood's starting to look good again. Coincidentally, I'm starting to see chain stores again.
It wasn't exactly a freeway, but it definitely was meant for people in cars. When I-44 did come to town, it cozied right up to the old highway.
How am I supposed to enjoy scenic Route 66 and I just keep ending up on the freeway?
But this would create a new problem, one state engineers would have to invent a fix for.
What about all the property owners along here who were used to connecting directly to the highway who can't because it's now a limited access freeway?
In the last video, I showed you how the state of Illinois built bypasses around towns, keeping all the old roads intact and putting the new freeway somewhere else. But outside of St. Louis, engineers put the freeway right on top of Route 66. And you can't have a side street or a business driveway connect to a road where people are going 70 miles an hour.
Well, they built these one-way high-speed frontage roads on the side that connect to the businesses directly.
And these frontage roads act like a liaison. Slow enough for the businesses, fast enough to connect back onto the freeway.
I think they stole the idea from somewhere. Houston, Texas.
Frontage Roads, Texas. Every Texas interstate.
All these new interstate highways needed an official shield. The federal government held a contest. States submitted all kinds of ideas. The one they picked was a combination of ideas from Texas and Missouri.
I-44 never really ventures that far away from US 66, which means there's always a perfectly good new road right nearby, which makes it really tempting to not maintain the old highway.
Is it because 66 is closed forever?
This video is not sponsored by Gambly. Dump your money into this app because you're good at predicting things, even better than the people with insider info. And it's legal in all 50 states, probably. Gambly, America's last industry. This is, or was, where Route 66 crossed the Meramec River.
This was built in 1931. Uses something called a Warren Truss. It's underneath the road instead of driving through it like the other two bridges.
Triangles don't like to bend, so if you put a bunch of them flat and sideways, it makes a really strong bridge structure that is really long and also not very tall, because you don't want a big fat truss hanging down into the river.
The truss is underneath the road, boat going underneath, more likely to get smacked in the head.
The Route 66 Meramec River crossing really was the beginning of when the state of Missouri was mass constructing bridges.
Go back to the mid-1910s, you could probably count on your fingers and toes how many bridges Missouri was working on. By the 1930s, this was one of over 2,000 the state was designing at the same time.
And for a few decades, drivers really put this bridge to work.
This baby carried all the coast-to-coast traffic until 1968 when Interstate 44 opened up.
And after Missouri decommissioned Route 66 in the 1970s, they didn't really need this bridge anymore. But deterioration got so bad in 2009, Missouri closed the bridge.
And the concrete on these columns is spalling off, which is a fancy engineering term for falling off. See this exposed rebar here? Metal is really strong when you pull on it, tension forces. It's really weak in compression, squishing forces. But that's okay, the concrete around it, it can handle compression really well. Except the concrete is gone now, and the metal that's left, it's not going to hold the bridge by itself.
If they just left it alone, this bridge would be a safety hazard.
So to try to save this thing from falling down, or at least make it last a little bit longer, they got rid of that concrete driving deck on top. Tons of weight gone, so these columns don't have to do so much work.
That takes a lot of stress off the bridge and off risk management lawyers. But now the bridge is completely useless.
One idea floating around is to turn this thing into a bicycle and pedestrian path and connect both sides of it over the Meramec River. But before they can do that, they're going to have to spend millions fixing these columns up to make this thing safe so it doesn't fall down.
As we continue geeking out over vintage roads the same way some people geek out over vintage roller coasters, which we're going to ignore,
literally everybody else in America would be making a right turn. To show you just how unimportant Route 66 can be in some places, how de-emphasized it is, check this out. At this intersection here, they don't even break the yellow line. It's almost as if Route 66 isn't even here.
And just stopping to take a look at it draws the attention of the locals. This guy's nice, though. He just wanted to see if I broke down. As we leave the outskirts of the St. Louis metropolitan area and genuinely enter central Missouri, the old highway and the new one merge back together.
Road designs in the 1920s, you just kind of followed the contours of nature.
Little Model Ts didn't go much faster than 45, and there weren't that many of them at first.
This old bridge gives you a taste of what Route 66 was really like, and it's still open to the public. Crossing the Big Piney River, structural engineering geeks will get excited about this. It uses two types of trusses. These are Pratt trusses because they're flat on top. It's not drive-through, obviously, where the tops are tied together, because otherwise you'd have to have a car that's 4 feet tall. But over here, they use something called a Whitney truss, which, don't ask me what that means, other than it means that all the top part, it's all diagonal up there. And of course, both sides are tied together, so this is also a drive-through truss.
Missouri gave it a major rehab in the 1970s and again around 2014.
Just talking with a guy who lives here, he's telling me in 2017 the flooding got so bad it went all...
It very easily could have washed this bridge away. Thankfully, it didn't.
After some of these floods, they've added these giant rocks. As geotech people call these riprap, because when the water comes through, these rocks are too heavy to wash away. That helps hold the soil in place, so there's still soil holding up the bridge.
What also helps is this hasn't been the through route for at least 80 years.
This was fine for Model Ts in the 1920s. It was not ready for the 1940s wartime traffic.
And the big army trucks especially hated winding around hairpin curves in the hills.
Throughout pretty much all of human history, you followed kind of organically the contours of nature. So if you had a big hill, well, you'd go around the hill horizontally or up over the hill vertically.
Which this highway did. Hence the name Devil's Elbow. And this wasn't good enough for America's war apparatus.
1941, the Works Progress Administration paid the money to say, look, just build us a machine. We got to get things from point A to point B. And so they built this, a 4-lane road that was as straight as possible. Because the thing about a machine is, it doesn't care about nature.
And Missouri was about to show me how nature could put up a pretty good fight.
So what do you do if you want your highway to go straight through a hill, but the hill was made out of solid limestone? Well, you start blasting.
These rocks are as deep as a mid-rise office building is tall.
That's something like a 90-foot elevation drop from where nature says we ought to build the road to where mankind built the road.
So in September 1941, crews started building Hooker's Cut, named after some guy named John Hooker who lived nearby.
Now, digging down almost 100 feet would be no big deal, but this isn't your typical hill. It's solid limestone.
Apparently, this was a seafloor 500 million years ago. So you can thank ancient prehistoric sea life.
This would be a great story to lie to you and say, it's an engineering first, but the Pennsylvania Turnpike, they were already doing things bigger than this.
More than 700,000 pounds of explosives.
300,000 cubic yards of limestone that they had to haul away. And I go, well, about how big's a cubic yard? It's about the size of a washing machine. So 300,000 solid limestone washing machines that they had to drag out of here.
But in the middle of man's contempt for nature, designers came up with a few new engineering designs we still use today.
Falling rocks. You don't want something coming 90 feet from the sky down onto a car. It's like dropping a giant rock out of a 9-story building. This doesn't look as impressive as you think it would because you're not seeing all 90 feet. You're just seeing 30 feet, where it goes in 15 feet on a ledge, up another 30 feet, then another ledge, and then up again. So that way, if a rock falls off, there's a good chance it lands on a ledge rather than coming all the way down to the highway.
And the reverse to keep you from hitting the rock.
An engineer in 1930 is going to cut the rock wall right here at the edge of the pavement because physically that's where it needs to be. But a 1940 engineer is going to spend an enormous amount of money digging through all that limestone to come over 20 feet and cut it here. Why? Somebody's not paying attention. Instead of immediately crashing into the rock wall, they've got 20 feet of forgiveness. These types of engineering details, which are very expensive, are going to show up in 15 years when it came time to set the standards for the interstate highway system.
And just another 30 miles down the road, the very first contract to build an interstate highway, it was right here in Missouri.
66 was a very dangerous road in the beginning. They weren't used to making all those curves.
Rod Reed was growing up in Lebanon, Missouri, as crews built out that freeway contract.
That's when things changed. A lot of the communities got bypassed, but a lot of the communities stayed true to who they were. Dad bought a 10-unit motel, operated that until 1967.
But customers just weren't getting off the freeway enough, and those that did,
Coming into Lebanon, for some reason, threw their pop bottles out. and we'd pick them up and sell them, and that's how we got our spending money.
But for the next family business, the freeway turned out to be a big help.
Mom started a business in 1972, and that grew. My brother and I joined the company, and today we've got 50 employees.
Tourists on buses stopping to look at pocket knives.
90% of our customers live 100 miles away or further.
He tells me simply being on Route 66 doesn't make or break the business.
You had to advertise to the traveler and then make sure that we've got a product that they want.
A lot of it looks like the kind of stuff somebody might want to buy if they're going backpacking up a mountain. And I'm more of a car guy.
I realized I don't like hiking because there's sort of a claustrophobia, because if you're 3 miles up the mountain, you have to hike 3 miles back down if you get bored of it and don't want to hike anymore. But with Route 66 in this part of Missouri, you get tired of traveling Route 66? Well, I got good news. Interstate 44 is right there.
And whether you're selling knives or selling this, well, they can serve both roads, because quite often they're just side by side. Even if the signs are a little bit scary, but not quite as scary as this sign.
Injury or death, unstable bridge, underlined. Well, I was never planning to have a mailbag segment, but you keep sending me mail. First is a postcard from Andy, who correctly points out with the red Dorothy slippers there that Madison, Wisconsin can indeed get tornadoes. Andy's a network engineer who just enjoyed watching the Route 66 Illinois video. Hope you're enjoying the Missouri one. This from Sacramento comes from Bryce, who correctly points out that Grass Valley, California, which is prettier than it has any business being, has a freeway to nowhere because California had big plans to build freeways all over the place. Built a lot of them, but not all of them. Bob and Orem, thank you for your postcard. Says, love the channel. Keep up the good work. Will do, Bob. And a letter from New Jersey from Felix on the back of a calendar. Don't have a lot to write, but I enjoy watching your videos. Well, thank you very much for your letter, for all the postcards. And I just got an alert that there's more on the way, so it'll be fun to check that out. And thank you to the 900 and some odd people at patreon.com/roadguyrob who fund these videos so I can make them in the first place.
There are a lot of happy-looking signs on Route 66, like this sign Garden in St. Robert, Missouri. There are confusing signs.
Google Maps says this road is labeled U.S. Bike Route 66.
Which are more ambition than reality.
I don't think I want to ride a bike on this.
And then there are signs that are just flat out scary.
Stay off, deck may collapse, do not enter. Okay, I'll stay off it.
That's a warning from the Route 66 Association, not even the state.
So here's the drama with this bridge. About a decade ago, it got so deteriorated, Missouri DOT had to shut it down because, well, as the warning sign says, it's not a good bridge to even walk on.
And if it decides to go, they don't want anybody on it.
You could spend millions of dollars fixing it back up, but here's the problem.
In 1956, Missouri built two perfectly good bridges for Interstate 44, and just a couple of years ago, Missouri built a new bridge to carry frontage road traffic.
So you'd be spending a lot of money simply out of sentimentality for a bridge that nobody really needs. That poses a philosophical question about Route 66 because it feels like it's a museum from Chicago to Santa Monica and everything should be preserved. But the problem is it's over 2,000 miles long. That's too much to preserve everything. And this thing, well, it might not get preserved.
Currently, there are no plans for mankind to tear this bridge down, but nature
better come hurry and see it soon, but don't get too close. If you were geeking out at the last bridge, mixing and matching trusses, then I've got a bridge for you because this one has Pratt and Parker trusses, but they're all the kind you can drive through. You got the flat top, what are they called? Arsenio Hall trusses, Pratt trusses on the outside, and then in the middle you have the Parker trusses, those diagonal ones. The reason you use the diagonal ones is it saves money. You can have a longer span, but use less material, at least according to this great website from the North Carolina Department of Transportation, when I was looking up what a Pratt or Parker truss was. So over the last 100 years, you've had in the winter a bunch of salt you dump on there. Well, that makes the metal rust out. And then in the summer, the metal wants to expand because it gets hot, and then it contracts at night. And all that wear and tear over a century, well, it's worn out the screws that kind of bolt it all together. They're called pins and gusset plates. They've gotten so weak and deteriorated, they're afraid that stuff's going to come disconnected, and then the whole bridge is going to fall down.
On the next Road Guy Rob,
people in Carthage call this the Wee Bridge.
The highway drives on wood. It probably shouldn't.
Dadgummit, it's 1920 and Ma needs some ointments from the corner drugstore.
When America forgets your town, or even your entire state.
Oh, if that's original, I'd believe it.
Hopefully saving you some money at the pump if you're wanting to see Route 66 this summer and saw the prices. Like, forget it. And still to come, a collab with another road guy of sorts. And I had to look up all this research because the topic I don't know anything about. I asked him, how did he learn? He said he read the manual. So